Welcome to my channel. My name is Ebere of Bell Signatures. This is the first tutorial video I'm uploading. I've been answering a lot of questions that fashion designers ask on different social media platforms. So I figured I could just make videos of what I'm already teaching in our fashion school and upload them on YouTube so many people can have access to them. So please start by subscribing to our channel. You can also turn on your notification button, yes, so you get notified when we upload subsequent videos. Smock dresses are back in trend, so I'll be teaching us on how to make them. As you can see, it's a maternity smock dress with knee flare. We copied the one on the left side to make the one on the right hand side, but we'll be altering ours to have a strap and a flare sleeve. Now let's get to our workstation and start working. Okay, so for the basic measurements that we need for this particular smoking dress, remember I told you that it's for a pregnant woman, so it's maternity. You notice that the half length circumference is as big as the hip circumference. But even at that, I'm still going to be giving us techniques. I'm still going to be giving us tips on how to make it even for a normal measurement. So for the basic measurements, all we need is a measurement for the shoulder, the bust circumference, the underbust, both the horizontal and the vertical measurements, the half length, the hip, and of course the knee flare because of the style that we'll be making. So in other words, for normal gowns, the knee flare, you can as well assume that that's the length of the gown. So for this smoking dress or shirt dress, the knee flare is the length of the gown before we can now attach the flare. Okay, so I'm going to let you know how I folded this. For a normal dress, you fold using the measurement of the largest part of the body, which is usually the hip. But remember I said that this is for a pregnant woman. Unfortunately, the biggest part of her body, which is her stomach, also has the same measurement with her hip measurement. So here I used 17 to fold, and I'm going to tell you why. I use 17 because her biggest the biggest part of her body, which is her stomach, her bulging stomach, is 41, as well as the hip too is 41. So I can as well say you use the hip measurement. For a normal person, you use the hip measurement, but for a pregnant person, you use the stomach, which should be the largest part. But in my case here, two of them are the same measurement. So what I did is this. I divided the circumference by 4 and added 2 inches. I divided the circumference by 4 and added 2 inches. That's what you would do normally for a normal dress. But remember that what we are trying to make is a smocked dress. That means we need more allowances because by the time you use the elastic to sew it, it's going to shrink. So we need more allowances for that. That's why I folded it by 17. And what makes up the 17? I'm not going to use the whole of the 17. What makes it up is I need 4 inches as an extra allowance for the smocking. Then I'm now going to add the largest circumference divided by 4 plus 2 extra inches. Let me repeat it again. I need 4 inches as my allowance for the smoking dress. Then the largest circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches. So in this case, what I got was 41 divided by 4, which gave me 10.25 plus 2 inches, 12.25. Now I need additional 4 inches because I'm going to be using the elastic thread on it, and that would give me 16.5. That's why I used 17 as my fold. And I'm also going to be doing the same. I'm going to be using the same measurement for the back because there is not going to be any zipper allowance for the back. I'm not going to use zip because it already has elasticity, so it doesn't need any zip. So what I'm going to do, like I always do, is to have my startup line. For a normal dress, this usually is my shoulder line. But for this, I'm going to show you something. what I'm making, because it's a boob tube, because it's going to have a boob tube, what I'm going to do is to start from the depth that I desire for the gown. So for this particular person, I want to use 4 inches as the depth. So what I'm going to do is to remove 4 inches from the tape. You know, someone else might just decide to come here, remove the 4 inches, but I like to manage, okay, but I like to manage my fabric better. So instead of wasting all this, I'll rather remove the tape by 4 inches, then impute all my measurements. So what I'm going to be imputing is her under bust length, which is 15, her half length, which is 19, then the length of the gown, which is 39.5, then extra half inch for joining to the flare. I'm going to be repeating the same thing for this side, then I will rule it. The next thing I need you to note is this. Remember I said that we are going to be using 4 extra inches. Some people use 3, some people even use 2, but I don't want to take chances because this is for a pregnant person and she needs room enough for her baby born. But even for a normal person, I still use 4 for more comfort. So I'm going to measure out the 4 inches. I'm going to mark it. Now there are 2 options here. You can decide to just leave the cloth as it is folded and continue with every other measurement from this line as if here does not exist, or you fold it so it doesn't confuse you. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be folding this part so that it doesn't confuse anyone. Now it's time to impute my measurement. Remember, it's a boob tube. So her bust measurement is 11.5. I'm going to be putting it here and ruling a straight line so that it's going to help me to impute the bust measurement. Alright, so let me start from the shoulder measurement. Her shoulder is 14.5 divided by 2. You divide shoulder by 2. Divided by 2, you have 7.25, which is 7 1/4. 7.25. So this is for the shoulder. The bust is 40 divided by 4 because we are doing it both for the front and for the back. Remember, it's a circumference, but for the shoulder is a line. That's why we are dividing by 2. But the bust is the round, the circumference. That's why we are dividing it by 4. Remember that this cloth is on fold for the front and is also going to be on fold for the back. So that's why we are dividing it by 4. So the bust 40 divided by 4 is 10 plus 2 inches, that's 12. So we have 12 for the bust. The under bust is 35. This is the under bust. This is the half length. The under bust is 35 divided by 2 is 8.75. That's 8 3/4. This is where it should be. Plus 2 will give you 10.75. That's 10 3/4. So we put it there. And then the half length 41 gives us 10.25 plus 2, which is 12.25. That is 12 1/4. We also impute it. Now for the knee flare, assuming I was just making this as a normal gown, I could go ahead to impute the same thing for the hip here. Because of the elasticity, it's still going to follow the person's body, but because of the extra flare that we're going to be attaching to the knee, I would like to remove 1 inch from it. So we had 12.25 here minus 1 inch, just to bring out the person's figure better. I'm going to be doing 11.25, and the same goes for the half-inch allowance. The next thing I'm going to do is to connect. Remember, we've already added 2 inches. That means we've added every allowance that we need for this, and we'll be sewing it with just ½ inch. But in case you're not confident of your measurement, you can as well add extra 1 inch. Then use that 1 inch to sew. Now I must point out something. Assuming you were making an off-shoulder smocking dress, you can use this as your armhole, connecting it from here to the shoulder as your armhole. But because it's a boob tube and we don't want the armpit to be showing, we are going to come up by 4 inches. We don't want the armpit to be showing, but we also want to make a difference between the bust and the shoulder, because even though this is a boob tube, we're still going to be attaching a strap to it. So we'll come up by 4, measure the same 7, and that's the shoulder measurement here, so that it will be equal, and mark a straight line. That's, we'll connect it with a straight line. Then curve it out. So it's just going to be a little curve because of the strap that we are going to be adding to it. So now we are going to cut out. We'll cut out from this point, then we'll repeat the same for the back. So I want to point out to us that what I used already for the front and back of the upper bodies is 2 yards, or close to 2 yards already. For those of you who might want to know how many yards that you should use for just a gown, a short gown. So this is almost already 2 yards. So by the time you add your sleeve, you should be planning to use 2 yards, 2.5 yards for a person of that size. But if you're slim, 2 yards should do. So I wanted to point that out. Now for the flare, there is something I would like us to note first for the flare. Because of the style of the gown, the flare is not just from knee flare to floor length. It's going to flow and spread on the floor. So we need it to be long. Therefore, we're not going to be doing a 360-degree flare. Rather, we'll be doing a 180-degree flare. 180-degree flare. And for you to get your 180-degree flare, you're supposed to use the circumference that you want to attach the flare to. That circumference divided by 3.14. That's what gives you your 180-degree flare. So for this gown, you know, by the time we removed 1 inch from the hip circumference, with all the extra allowances that we added because of the elasticity, we got 45 for the knee flare circumference. So we'll be using it also to cut the flare. Now the length of the flare that we need is 54. I'm going to explain why. The gown, the person's measurement that I'm using, my client's measurement from shoulder to floor is 60. And her measurement from shoulder to her knee is 39.5. So what I'm going to do is to minus 39.5 from 60, and that's going to give me 20.5. Now I need extra 20 for the one that is going to flow on the ground. So I'm going to be adding that extra 20 to this 20.5, and that will give me 40.5. Now remember that I told you that for us to get our 180 degrees, for us to get our 180-degree flare, we'll be dividing this circumference 45 by 3.5. So we are going to do 45 divided by 3.5, and is sorry, 3.14. I'm so sorry for that. 45 divided by 3.14 is going to give us 14 point some figures, but I'm going to be approximating it to 14. Now you need this 14 and the length that you're going to be using, which is 40.5. So 40.5 plus 14 is going to give us 54.5. So that's how I got the length that I'm going to be using to cut the flare. I hope you got that. All right, let's go ahead and cut our flare. I'm going to show you how best to cut your flare, your 180-degree flare. I'm going to be cutting both the front and the back together. I'm going to be cutting it together, so it's going to be almost a complete circle. The only thing is that it's going to have it's not going to be a complete circle. It's going to have a slit because it's a 180-degree flare. It's not a complete circle. So what I'm going to do in order to get the length that I want, remember that I'm using length 54.5. So what I'm going to do is to measure 54.5 all the way from this side of the fabric. I'll measure 54.5, but you know, sometimes you can measure clothes and there will be it may not really be enough. So instead of just using 54.5, I'm going to add like extra 1 inch, so making it 55.5, just to have enough space for my clothes. So this 55.5, I'm going to be folding it into 2. So we folded the 55.5 into 2, so that we'll have this double layer. The next thing we are going to do is to fold it on bias. We'll be joining clothes to this because it's longer. We'll be joining extra fabric to a part of this, because what we need is 55.5 and it's up to here. And as if you can notice, this one is not up to that because it's Ankara. Maybe if it were any of these other clothes that are by 60 in length, it probably would have been enough. But because it's a normal Ankara, which is by 45, there is a shortage, so we are going to be attaching extra clothes for that. So now it's folded on bias. As you're folding, you need to be seeing where you have your shortage. You need to be seeing where you have the full length and where you have your shortage, so that you don't make any mistake. While folding, what you want to make sure that this place is still pointed, because that's where you're going to be measuring your half circle from. Now let's get straight to the measurement. Remember that when we divided the knee circumference by 3.14, which is half circle, what we got was 14 approximately. So what we will do is to impute from this point of the fabric, we're going to be imputing 14, and we're going to do it all the way here. Still from the point, you mark out 14, you mark out the length, still from the point. Next, you connect your curve like so. Now from this curve, you will now measure the length of the flare that we want, which is 40.5. 40.5. Now here we have 40.5. I would like to add half inch that I'm going to be using to attach. Somebody might decide to use a bias, but I'm going to be using crinoline to give it a wavy effect at the tip. So 40.5 plus another half inch is 41. So I'm going to be marking out 41. From this curve, I'll mark out 41 all through. To do is to cut this out. Then I'm going to be completing the difference between this and this. So remember, we measured the difference between this upper one that was short and this one. So we've gone ahead to cut out what we are going to use to complete it. So now both of them are now equal. We've already cut them out and joined here. So the next thing we will do for the flare to be complete is to cut out this arc that we made I've gone ahead to join it here so that it will be a round circle. So it will be a round circle. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to be showing everything right now, is that I'm going to turn it with a crinoline, like I said before, to give it the wavy effect. And with that, my flare will be ready and it will be wavy. Then I'm going to attach the flare to the already made smoked dress. Then our dress will be ready. After that, I'll just put the strap and my desired sleeve and our dress will be ready. I'm going to show you what everything